Welcome to the Discover Health podcast, where we explore the power of gut health, nutrition, and lifestyle to help you feel your best every day. I'm Dr. Josh Sharp, your guide on this journey to better digestion, more energy, and overall well-being. Ready to start discovering? Let's hit the trail. Welcome back to another episode of Discover Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Joshua Sharp, and joining me today all the way from Montreal, Canada, is Kamy Moussavi. He's the founder of Step Together and a former engineer. It's interesting how many engineers end up in the natural health world. I think I've interviewed, 4 or 5 at this point that were former engineers, and so I love talking to the engineers. I can't math good enough to be an engineer, but I like the engineering mind frame. I like how they logically put things together. So I like talking with engineers, but he's an engineer, former engineer who helps families rebuild their relationship with food and health, especially when ADHD and emotional eating are in the mix. He draws from his own childhood experiences, and now he teaches parents what most health systems never explain, and that is how dopamine, emotions, and brain-based patterns drive kids' eating behaviors, and how to create sustainable, shame-free habits that actually work in real life. Kamy, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Joshua, thank you for the opportunity.
So the first question I love to ask my guests is, what is your superhero backstory? In other words, what were the things that led you to be doing what you're doing now?
Superhero backstory is a very
Yeah.
interesting way to put it, because that's not how it felt while going through it. Just not too long ago, I was an engineer, just like you mentioned, and I was, not to brag, but at the peak of it, right? I was seeing all the success and especially everything you want to achieve in terms of material success and accolades and everything, and I had it all. But one thing I hadn't overcome is my difficulty with excess weight, my addictions with food, my addictions with other substances like alcohol, very briefly. And it was very strange to me that I had such strong willpower and discipline in one area of my life, and in another, completely blindsided. I would come home every night after a long day, just completely be overtaken, binge food. And then I even struggled with bulimia, which is a bit graphic, but I struggled with that for over a decade. And the root of that goes far back. So that was the beginning of the journey. And so I violently rejected that life and had to figure out what was going on. And I found out that this was going on for far longer than I even realized. When I was a kid, I was struggling with excess weight. I was struggling with undiagnosed ADHD that, no one in my surrounding really knew about, and a lot of emotional challenges that led to me using food as my primary coping mechanism. And this had stayed with me. And, as a kid, my mom brought me on many, many different programs: Jenny Craig, Weight Watchers, weight loss programs, doctors, dietitians. She really tried it all, and none of it worked. I would lose weight, I would gain it back. I would lose weight, I would gain it back. And this continued with me until adulthood. And so I had to figure out what was going on. And this is where the journey started. So where to begin? What was going on? My own path is somewhat different than a lot of people, but I went down the path of meditation, right? Sitting with it, sitting with myself and understanding what is underneath the trigger and the emotions that lead to me using food. And when I discovered that, there was so many things that were repressed. And in my mind, I was such an engineer. People really thought that, Kamy has no emotions. That was most people's experience of me, because I was so logical. Like, everything has a logical solution and you can solve it. But I found out that I was basically driven by emotions all the way through. And once I solved that, then I also solved it. It's a whole different story. I can tell you, Joshua, about how it led to like me finding out that I want to help children and how the whole journey started. But that was really the beginning. I had to discover what was leading to my own excess weight as a kid. And then now I'm doing my best to, with Step Together and the team that we have here, try to help other children and parents not go through the same pain that my family did.
That's great. And I think for so many people out there, they can resonate with a lot of different points of your story. And one of the things that really struck me that you said is you had great discipline in so many areas of your life. And obviously doing the schoolwork and the studying and everything that goes along with earning an engineering degree, that takes a lot of discipline. And then feeling like, okay, it's not that I'm an undisciplined person, but why are these other areas of my life feeling like I don't have control, or feeling like my body keeps wanting me to make choices that I don't want, or keeps me leading me to these places. When it came to figuring that out for yourself, what were some of the things that came up, and what were some of the factors that you noticed went into that discrepancy of discipline in certain areas, but not in other areas?
It's hard to pinpoint exactly what was, or what gave it away, but for the longest time, yes, it was like I track my calories, I burn more than I intake, and I lose weight, and it worked, right? I many times in my life I went up as high as 260 pounds, as low as 170, 160 pounds. And for my height, that would be very lean. I even ran marathons at some point. And I would run a marathon the next week after. I'm like binging out of control and I gained 20 pounds in a matter of 2 weeks. And it just felt out of control. And really what it came to me by surprise why it was emotions that was leading all of it. It's almost like I wasn't even focused on this anymore. I had emotional difficulties I needed to solve. I solved them, and then I noticed that my eating patterns just started melting away. Like I just no longer needed to go raid the kitchen or raid the fridge and eat all the ice cream in a sitting.
Yeah, I think that is so true for so many people, and they don't even realize it. They just, I think so often in the modern world, we're very distracted. We suppress a lot of our undesirable feelings that we have. And one of the easiest places to turn, and I think a lot of times because it's just so readily available, we don't have to go out and kill something in the woods and drag it home and skin it and do all the work of preparing food. It's just, you've got food in your pantry, food in your fridge. If you don't have any there, you can go to the store, and within seconds, you can have anything you want that can make you, quote unquote, feel better. And so I think for so many people, they turn to food as that crutch. And for you, obviously, figuring out what was behind that, it naturally led to a change there. And what's amazing is, even though you went through periods where you had tremendous discipline, like training for a marathon and then successfully completing a marathon, it it just seemed like, based on what you said, you went right back to that. And I think there's so many people out there that can resonate with it. They set out to make a huge change in their diet. Okay, I'm going to cut out sugar. I'm not going to have sugar anymore, or whatever the diet change is. And they can do really well, but then it just seems like they go back to it so quickly. Can you explain maybe some of the physiology behind that, or what's going on in the body whenever we feel like we just have to turn to something like that?
So experientially, your brain does a really good job at tricking you that anything that you feel is really hunger. Like, especially because now we work with children, they don't really understand what's going on inside. They can't differentiate the minute difference between anxiety and physical hunger. And your brain's only responsibility is to turn you toward pleasure and run away from pain. Very simply. And if it figures out that telling you that you're hungry is a really quick way for you to go get food, which gives you dopamine and serotonin. So it's a nice cocktail of, ADHD medication and anti-anxiety medications. It's beautiful. It's a very simple solution. And your brain's like, okay, I will rely on food because it's the most fast, convenient way for me to get it reliably. And very interesting because not everyone has this response, right? Not everyone goes to food for comfort. Why is that? Same question we can ask for people who go to alcohol. Some people, alcohol gives them a strong kick, and some people, it's like myself, I drink alcohol. I don't really care. I go to sleep, right? That same response happens to people with food. Some people, their brain is really, really receptive to food as a way to get dopamine, and it really lights them up. They call themselves foodies, right? If you go some like it's a really good way to tell if someone's a foodie is when they go traveling, are they focused more on the sights or the restaurants, right? So that combined with a brain that needs to have comfort and stimulation is just a easy way for you to go to food for that.
That's starting to make a lot of sense. If you would, tell us, what is dopamine? What is serotonin? What do they do in the brain? And what is it about food that triggers that release?
Put it in very simple terms, dopamine is a neurotransmitter that is released in your brain in terms of motivation and reward. So once you eat, for example, a bar of chocolate, your brain's like, oh, this was really rewarding. And why is that? Because your brain has learned over millions of years of evolution that something that has a lot of calories, really dense, and really quickly delivered to your body, probably good for your survival, probably something that we want more of. And then it motivates you, it releases even more dopamine for you to go get more chocolate. So you fall into this cycle of, yeah, something feels extremely pleasurable. It releases a lot of dopamine, and then you want more of it. And then serotonin is another neurotransmitter that regulates your emotions, it regulates your amygdala. And so food gives you both of these, a lot of pleasure and a lot of calming, soothing effect. And some people get, it really is interesting. Some people, when we do our consultations, I often like to ask parents, does your child go more towards sweets or more towards salty, crunchy foods? There's often a big split. Myself, it was sweets, right? I'm going to go find the chocolate that my mom hid first. And then once I'm done with all the chocolate, maybe I'll go to the bag of chips if I'm interested, right? So it's very simply this. Your brain has learned that these are ways to get the neurotransmitters that help it survive.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to learn about brain chemistry, and when you have just a bit of an understanding of how that works, you don't have to be a neuroscientist or a neurologist or anything. You just need to have a basic understanding of what's happening in your brain when you put certain foods in your mouth and what that triggers to kind of get an idea of like, oh, my body is asking for something or my body feels like it needs something and I turn to this to give myself a reward, or maybe I feel a certain way, and so I don't want to feel this way, and so I want to trigger that reward chemical, and so my natural instinct is to go this way. If you would walk us through what are some ways that people could figure out what is triggering them, what thoughts or what emotions that they're having that are triggering these responses. Like, how do people figure this out?
The first thing I would look at is, well, specifically, let's focus on the hunger signal, right? When you feel hungry, you can very simply tell if you're looking for either stimulation, which is you're bored, you want something, and your brain's like, hey, hunger is a good way to solve this issue. Boredom is actually extremely painful, right? If you ask most people these days to sit in a room for 10 minutes, they're going to go crazy. They just can't stand it. I'm probably the same too. I mean, I did a lot of meditation in the past, but now running this business and everything, it's always stimulation. And I also have ADHD, right? So it's really painful, and your brain's looking for stimulation. You can very simply tell, am I willing to eat something like chicken and broccoli? Not, then very high likelihood that it's not true hunger, right? So you're looking for these signs. You're looking for when you have that response, when you have the hunger signal, is it looking for some stimulation? And even then, if you notice and you pay attention when you have hunger, and this is typically at night, body might be tricking you that other deeper emotions are hunger. And it's very simple. Your brain, your frontal lobes of your brain, the part of your brain that has top down control over your amygdala, the emotional center, it naturally winds down at night, right? In the morning, you have a lot of executive control. In the evening, you don't. And then your brain, if you're having a lot of anxiety or stress or anything to suppress, at night, it becomes overwhelming. It comes up. And then suddenly you get, if you really sit with it, most people don't have this experience, but if you sit behind the hunger signal or any other addiction, right? A lot of people drink at night. A lot of people smoke even more excessively. They smoke weed or cigarettes or anything, right? You sit with it, you will notice your body, you might even notice a little bit of a vibration of anxiety. It's like, it's extremely uncomfortable. Then eventually your brain snaps and you're like, okay, I'm going to go eat it no matter what. And often this is where becomes a sign of addiction, right? Despite not wanting to do something, you're not able to. You lose control and you go to it. These are just very simple telltale signs that we can start looking at.
Yeah, I think for a lot of the listeners out there, as adults, we've got the ability to maybe piece things together a little better. We have an understanding of what we're looking for and the process of figuring out, okay, yeah, I'm this is what I'm feeling, or I'm always feeling this way at this time of day, and I always want to go to these certain foods at this time of day. What could be behind that, and figuring that out, playing detective. When it comes to working with a kid, obviously the process probably is a little bit different. Maybe they're less able to tell you the feelings that they're having, or maybe they're less able to tell you, what's going on the inside. What does that look like trying to figure out what's behind these thoughts and feelings working with a kid?
You're totally right. Children, even adults, they're not introspective enough or have spent enough time really paying attention to what's internal. With children specifically, because their frontal lobe starts developing maybe around 6, 7 years old and it matures by their 20s. Typically, the children that we work with they're around early teens. They have very little. Even the ability to apply the things that they would learn in terms of emotional control. Right? Because what you need and to be able to control your emotions or understand your emotions is more frontal lobe development. Tell a bit more about how that comes into play, but very simply, what we can start doing is slowly take away whatever is suppressant, whatever is pushing down the emotions, whether it's technology, whether it's food, whether it's behavioral addictions, children who are, you know, very attached, very anxiously attached, or even avoidant, and they go in the room and just play video games and suppress all their emotions. You slowly taper these away and you notice the emotions behind just naturally bubble up. Like your kid is going to become a tantrum, right? They're gonna kick and scream. And that's a good sign. It's emotions popping up. Often we see children 2 months into the program, they express to their parents for the first time that they feel lonely. They're grieving something. So many times we hear stories of children grieving a, sometimes it's death, sometimes it's something else, but the parents had no idea. Like that affected you? I didn't know. Never had the chance to even experience it. The child just immediately, their body was like, this is overwhelming. I'm going to food for it. Those things
Yeah.
naturally come up. Once you start taking the things that cause them to suppress, they will naturally come up. There's no choice. Your body has to process emotions.
That makes a lot of sense, and I think that this example could even apply to an adult who is maybe unsure of some of the things that are behind it. So, if you would, you talked about slowly pulling back from the thing that they might be addicted to, whether that's food, certain type of food, sweets, or whether that's some type of salty, snack food, or maybe it's something like video games, another thing that will trigger a dopamine hit. Give us an example of how to pull back and how much do you pull back? What does it actually require? How long does it take in order to start to see the behaviors come out?
Of course, it's case by case, right? There's no one size fits all, and we work very closely with families to go through this transition. But the first truth that parents have to come to realization is can't solve an addiction without changing the environment. You just can't. If you have cocaine addiction and there's cocaine in the house, good luck, right? And there are many studies that show that cocaine for some people is less addictive than sugar. Right? Some people sugar has a even higher dopamine response, which is crazy to believe, and I would totally believe it. I've never done cocaine, but sugar has such a strong response for me that I could believe it. That's the first thing. Parents will go to their nutritionists or dietitians or doctors, and they're going to talk about moderation, which is fair. They're going to talk about not restricting, which is also fair. But you have to understand what is giving your child dopamine and help them at least put some barriers in front of it. So, for example, instead of having ice cream in the house, we work with parents to just make it a habit whenever we have ice cream, we go for a 30-minute walk outside. We put some effort in front of dopamine so that your brain does a quick calculation. Am I getting free dopamine or do I have to put some effort into it? And you'll notice that kids won't want ice cream that often if they know they have to walk every time for it. They're just gonna stop asking. Even adults, right? But
Yeah.
then it's up to the adult to be able to put the willpower to apply a rule like that. So it's very simply taking away dopaminergic foods in the house, which are sugary for some people, salty and crunchy. Even for myself, when I was a kid, my mom having bread in the house, she would even put the bread in the freezer, and I would find it and I would eat it frozen. So much dopamine it was giving me, right? Because bread is a very highly refined food. Flour is like absorbed really quickly in your stomach, and for me, it was giving a very strong dopamine response. So it's slowly tapering those off, slowly tapering off technology. And technology, there's many ways to put barriers in front of it. Parents listening to this, they probably have heard of time restriction or different kinds of things. We show specifically a app called Screen Zen that instead of completely blocking after 30 minutes, for example, what it does is it simply makes you have to wait, for example, 60 seconds before accessing TikTok. So the same thing with the ice cream, you have to do some effort before accessing the dopamine. And you'll see that if your kid has to wait 60 seconds before getting access to their scrolling, they might not do it all the time, at least, right? They're gonna maybe like consider another way to get their engagement and dopamine. So it's simply this making these small changes, both for the parents and for the kids, tapering them off. Then you're gonna see the emotions behind come up.
Yeah, I think these are great pieces of advice, and I think there's a lot of people out there. Hopefully some light bulbs are coming on, like, oh, okay, maybe I could try this or try that. Now, you mentioned free dopamine, like super quick, easy to come by dopamine, and then you mentioned, okay, am I going to have to put in some effort for it? So, first of all, I want to, clear things up. Dopamine, it's not a bad thing, right? Like we want dopamine, we need it. When does it start to become something that is causing a problem? And then what are some ways that we could get, good or positive or beneficial dopamine releases?
Forget where I heard this, but it's a very beautiful saying. Anything that gives you free dopamine or very cheap dopamine will inevitably ruin you. The biggest example of this is fentanyl. I used to live in San Francisco for the longest time, and the streets are full of people who are incredibly addicted to fentanyl and other drugs, and they just can't help it, right? Food isn't as extreme, technology isn't as extreme, but I was also before this in an industry where I was building video games specifically for VR headsets for children. And I know how much, like, billions of dollars are poured into technology to make these things as addictive and dopaminergic as possible. Same thing is true for the food industry, right? There's so much money into making food more engaging, more. I mean, what is a goldfish? Basically, a refined chemical product that is engaging for kids and they like to eat it, right? There's so much money poured into the design of these things. So these are the cheap dopamines that you want to avoid. But you also get dopamine when you exercise, right? At the tail end of an exercise session, you get endorphin, you get dopamine, you feel good. Like you've heard of the runner's high, right? Generally, five sources of dopamine that you want to steer your kids towards and away from. The away from is the technology and food. Towards, you want to go towards play. So anything that involves playing something, whether it's tag or Legos, creativity, drawing, sketching, finger painting, anything that's creative, building. So many kids, we get them to do 3D printing from a young age and just gets their mind like active and constantly trying to think like they design the models themselves and they build it. Physical touch. When a child asks you for a snack, you can give them a hug and you'll notice that that craving will go away. Sad because that's probably what would have worked for me, right? For me, physical touch is a really good source. And I'm like, yeah, if my mom, instead of scolding me when I wanted a snack, she gave me a hug, it goes a long way. Socialization, typically we see this with girls, but guys too. Get them engaged, get them to talk about their day, get them distracted, right? Give them attention. And then exercise. It's a little bit of a hard sell, but making it combined with play, like tag is a good example of this, or biking, riding a bike, or anything like that. Anything that for them generally feels fun, but also is combined with exercise. Great source of dopamine.
Yeah, these are great things to understand. Dopamine isn't bad, but essentially it's that reward chemical. And so when you're eating a sugary substance, which ultimately is going to have a net negative, it's going to be bad for your body. It's going to do bad things that we don't want to happen. And it's going to lead us, basically, you said it's going to destroy you, with these bad things that can cause these free dopamine hits. Um, you're training your body, you're training your brain. Oh, this is how I get this reward. And so you're just reinforcing the habit over and over and over again. Whereas things that you just mentioned, play and exercise and expressing yourself artistically or doing something creative or engaging with other people in community, those things have a positive, they're a net positive. And so getting the reward chemical for doing those things is going to serve you much better than the reward chemical that comes from scrolling or playing video games or eating eating food for a quick dopamine hit. And so it's starting to make a lot of sense. And so I hope light bulbs are coming on for people.
The
And I
difficulty
love that
and
you talk about putting something in the way of it that, okay, there's going to be some work involved. And so it's not your brain's not seeing it as just this free hit of dopamine. So it's starting to make so much sense. Now, I think for so many people out there, they have tried making these hard and fast rules when it comes to diet change. And sometimes it's a little easier for a mom with a child. She can just say, okay, we're not going to buy or keep this thing in the house. And you talked about changing the environment, and that can be good. But for an adult that is maybe trying to rein their own selves in, they don't have the accountability of their parent being the gatekeeper of food in the house or something like that. Uh, when it comes to willpower, I've heard you talk about that willpower often doesn't work, or it's not that you just need more willpower. What's a better way to conquer these things, and why is it that willpower usually leads to failure?
Great question. Well, two things come to mind. One is if we really treat this like food being an addiction, which is in very small ways it is, right? Doing an activity that hurts you and you can't stop, very simple definition of an addiction. You have to treat it just like they do in, you know, AA or these other programs. You have to find a deep enough reason to stop. That's often what we have to do with parents themselves, right? Why would you give up the free dopamine? We live in such a dark world. Why would you not just like have the quick hits of pleasure in whatever ways you can? Do you have a strong enough reason to? Does it matter at all? Parents, if we help them make the connection as to how their own habits relate to their children's health, and there's no parent that doesn't want to see their child grow to their fullest potential, a strong enough motivator. But the other part is you also have to understand truly the triggers behind it. If you're blind to think that, yeah, it's just a matter of willpower and, oh, it's as easy as not having it in the house. Gee, Kami, I never thought about that. I just know don't shouldn't have no. Like there's periods in my life where my environment was perfect and I would literally drive to the store, steal candy because I had blocked off my credit cards. I would even
You
combine it
you
with
were
alcohol.
definitely an addict. Yeah, you're stealing candy.
Right. Yeah. And so in that case, there's no amount of willpower or nothing that solves it, right? To figure out what I was suppressing, what was truly going on underneath. Behind all this noise and behind all these behaviors, I personally, I can go in depth into my story, but if people are interested, you can also see it on my website. I'm pretty open about it. There was a lot of emotional pain growing up, family dynamics, parental divorce, some early death in my childhood. Those things I had suppressed, and unfortunately, my parents just didn't know how to deal with it. They like my mom carried even more pain. If you're a mom listening, I'm sure you're carrying so much pain that you never want your child to be exposed to. But children can pick up these things, right? Children, their emotional well-being depends on the mom. If the mom is not happy or anxious in a very small fraction, the child picks it up. If they don't know how to deal with it, they will find ways outside themselves to cope with it. And then eventually they get a disconnect. And this is very common. It's especially with children with ADHD. It's a condition called alexithymia, which means emotional blindness. You become blind to the emotional world. You become blind to anything. People will call you robots, right? They're going to think you have no emotion. But it's actually because your emotions are so overwhelming that your brain disconnected it. Like, I don't know what to do with this. This is too much. I'm just not going to feel it. But the emotion will find other routes to go get it addressed, such as stealing candy from a store as an adult, right? Very embarrassing, but that happened.
Well, I think that just really illuminates how addictive some of these food substances can be, and I think it also illuminates the depths that we're willing to go, and maybe some people aren't stealing stuff from a store, but sneaking food. I think that a lot of people could relate to that, or maybe you buy something that you really like and you want to make sure that your family doesn't eat it all and you want to save it all for yourself. So you maybe hide it in the back of the pantry or you kind of, put it somewhere where you don't think you're. So I think a lot of people can relate just in different ways. And that's a sign that you've got a problem. You've got a problem, my friend. When you're putting those cookies and you're kind of strategically placing them to hide them from others, that's a sign. That should be a sign. And so I think it's a great thing that you've been willing to be open and share about that. And I think it's something that if people are really honest with themselves, they could relate to, regardless of whatever that thing might be. Let's shift gears here just a little bit. because one of the things that you talked about and one of the groups of people that you help are people with ADHD. And you talked about that connection. If you would, give us your definition of ADHD and what can be behind that ADHD. And then I've got a follow up right after that.
So I'm an engineer. I like to reduce things to simple terms so that we can digest them. For me, ADHD is very simply a deficit of dopamine in the brain, right? The same neurotransmitter that we talked about. For one reason or another, there's a deficit in it. Now, there's two different types of ADHD. If the audience has heard of these, it's either inattentive ADHD and hyperactive ADHD, right? One kind is the kid that just can't stand still and just they're a bomb and they're just waiting to explode. The other is typically in girls, someone who's a little bit more aloof in their head all the time. You have to talk to them 3 times before you can get their attention, right? And that was myself when I was growing up. It was often me. I was in my head and I was um, not really present there. My brother used to always joke to me that it's just so hard to talk to me. Like, where am I? He would talk to me straight in the face and I just got distracted. I was thinking of something else. There's many reasons as to why that could happen. One is back to the emotional stress. Your brain is constantly under emotion, stress, grief, anxiety. It's again your frontal lobes that has to suppress it. And if your frontal lobes has to constantly suppress your emotions, it's going to be needing something to help it, right? It's going to need some fuel. And the fuel that it loves is serotonin and dopamine again. So that's another way to experience the dopamine deficit. Your brain needs more to be able to suppress the emotions. But another kind is just, I love this about ADHD. It's to reframe this as people, it makes a lot of sense for them to have a deficit naturally of dopamine because in our society, we need some people who are happy to be farmers and just do a normal life. And we need the crazy people who are explorers. They need to go across the ocean because what else are they going to do? Right. And so this is how our species has survived. A lot of people who are ADHD, they don't even know it, but they're addicted to work. They're entrepreneurs. They're artists. They're people who just naturally need more stimulation and engaging from birth. Genetically, you can detect this in the brain from a young age. So I'm curious, what is your follow up?
I think you've started to touch on it already. Um, so I like your definition, and I think it lines up pretty well with conventional definition of a dopamine deficit. The follow-up question is, or one follow-up question, I should say, is does that mean that people that have ADD, ADHD, are they more susceptible to addictions, whether that's food addiction, whether that's screen addiction, things like that? Are they more susceptible?
Absolutely. Yes, there's actually, I heard this saying recently the first 3 letters of addiction are ADD. Right.
That is
and so,
true. You can't deny that.
right. And so it's very simple. A brain that has a deficit of dopamine will try to find it from the external world, right? But it's not every kid or every adult who goes to food, right? Or alcohol or specific drugs. You have to really become familiar with the genetic predisposition that you are, like the cards that you're dealt, right? And typically we can branch these in the family history, you're going to see a lot of these patterns. People who are alcoholics in the family, very likely that you're going to have. But often, no, it's often your dad's an alcoholic, you have a food problem, which was the case for me. And also explaining why in our program, Step Together, that we created, it was a surprise to me. 80% of the children doing it have ADHD. And it's not like we're specifically targeting, or it's just like it's a program to help children with excess weight, but it just so happens that a vast majority of them have ADHD. And because of that, they eat compulsively, they get out of control, they have emotional eating, and they need help.
Yeah, it's starting to make a lot of sense. The other follow-up question I was going to ask you is the the conventional method of treating ADHD is medicating with a stimulant. If you would talk about what that can do in the brain and some of the dangers that can go into that type of treatment or selecting that type of treatment. And then for maybe parents out there that are just really um, maybe they feel like they don't have hope to do anything besides medication. if you would maybe offer some encouragement, or are there things out there that can help make a difference without the medications?
I do have to put a disclaimer. I'm not here to give medical advice, but I can tell you from experience from myself and my brother, who's a doctor, and the people that we've helped. The first time I went on stimulation medication, I felt like everything was finally okay. Like, wow, this is how people feel normally. The tension that I had in my head, that really is the experience of dopamine deficiency, it just went away. I was like really happy. But then I quickly built a tolerance to it. I needed more. And it was never enough. And I eventually I did stabilize at a point, but quickly that euphoria feeling that I had, it went away. It never it never really helped address the addictive patterns. Sure, some of my food intake was gone, but what it did is it masked the underlying issue. And the important here, like everything we do at Step Together is help parents solve the root cause. But if you use medication to mask it and temporarily fix it, you're never going to actually see what the root cause is. And oftentimes, parents just need more and more, especially if the emotional stuff piles on. They need more and more medication because they never actually saw the actual problem at face value. So, what I highly recommend parents listening to this, try the holistic approach to the extent that you can before considering medication. In very simple terms, you have to solve for this dopamine equation for the child's brain. Some children, if your child's the case, they just might need more. You have to guide them toward a life that is just more engaging, more stimulating, not just sitting at a desk and just listening to a teacher say, like, f- I could never listen to a teacher at all. And all of my, like, even when I was going through engineering school, I would skip all my classes. I would ask my friends for notes, and I was still able to figure out and get a 4.0 GPA regardless. But just expect that your child might be different. They might need other ways to get that dopamine, and just set them up for that life. Don't expect them to just be normal in that case, right? And of course, address the holistic stuff, the nutrition, the exercise, the healthy ways to get dopamine as opposed to the unhealthy ways. And you're going to see, just like myself, now I don't need medication because the work that I do is so engaging, and because my life, I take care of my health to the best of my abilities. I don't need the medication. And hundreds of families that we worked with are finding themselves in that situation too.
I think that's great, and I do think that for many parents out there, they're not really given many options, at least in the United States. So here's your diagnosis, here's your med, here's your drug, and very, very little thought is ever given to what are the factors, what are the underlying root cause factors behind this, and what are some ways that we could address those before we use a medication, which unfortunately has some very devastating side effects for a lot of people. So I love that you offer some hope that it doesn't have to be the only option. Medication, talking about medication, and also there's a lot of places you can improve. There's a lot of places that you can help just with some simple lifestyle shifts, with some simple dietary shifts. And this is something that's been rattling around in my brain for a while. My wife and I have discussed it quite a bit. Is not every single kid is meant to just sit in a classroom in a seat all day, every day, and listen to a teacher. I don't think historically, I don't think many kids were programmed that way. And so I love that you pointed out that set them up for a life that's engaging, and that can, get them out there getting dopamine from being active and doing things that are exciting. And so I love that you pointed that out, because I think that so often, a little plug for homeschooling here. If you have an opportunity to homeschool, if you feel like that's something that you can do and would be great, I think it's such a good option because it gives you some freedom to do things like that, to get outside more, to move around more, to interact in different ways besides just sitting in the same classroom in the same seat all the time. And so, little plug for homeschooling. If you have an inclination, definitely look into it. First of all, let's talk about making some shifts. Okay, a parent, they recognize, okay, we want to make some changes in our home. We want to make some changes with what our kids are eating and what they're doing. And we want to make some changes in our life as well. What would be good first steps? And what are some like really high impact things that people can focus on?
Designed the Step Together program in a very specific way to make it fully feasible for most families. And I'm very open about it. The program is, we first start with awareness. First, take inventory of what is truly happening. I even built this app for the program where all we ask parents themselves to do is take a picture of everything that goes into your mouth for the first week.
And
Just you
post
see
it on
already.
social media? Are you supposed to
Yeah,
take a
it
picture
has
of
to
it and then post it on
go,
social media?
it goes straight to Instagram. No choice. But it's really just between them and the coach. And just in that first week of them building the awareness, they see that, wow, there are so many things. Parents are often focused on their children, but themselves, right? There's so many things that they didn't even notice that they were doing, and their children are just picking up on. So what is happening? Right? And then very slowly, we just help them move from dopaminergic foods towards whole foods that are more slowly digesting. And this process typically takes a month, right? You don't want to do it too abruptly because your body's going to go through withdrawal and you're going to lash back and you're going to say, screw this. I'm never, never doing it, another diet again. I'm giving up. You have to do it very slowly. Like both the gut microbiome changes that are happening are immense, which are absolutely in control of your food preferences and everything that goes on in your mood and your mental health, but also just the addictive components, right? If you're using this as your emotional, if it's your last chance to have any kind of emotional support, it's the ice cream in the at 11 p.m. once the kids are in bed. Then if you take it away, it's gonna rear its head in other ways, right? So you have to take the time. Then we focus on sleep, right? Having consistent sleep, having no screens before bed, actually getting deep restorative sleep, breaking out of technology addiction, which everyone struggles with these days. It's rare that I meet someone that says, "Yeah, I don't waste at least 30 minutes of a day scrolling on something," right? And often it's more. And often parents are surprised. We ask them to look at the time that their kids spend on these screens, 4 to 6 hours a day easily. And then it's slowly introducing movement in terms of play into the house, right? Not just forcing the kids to. It's so funny. My mom bought me a treadmill for Christmas when I was a kid. And she would force me to go to Zumba classes at the YMCA with her. So those things leave a bad taste, right? It has to exercise.
Okay. I feel so much better. Okay, I'm not the only guy that's ever gone to a Zumba class. You've done it too, so I feel I feel better.
Yeah, yeah. Well, never again, though. I never stepped foot into a YMCA ever again after that experience. So yeah, it's very simple stuff like that. But once you solve those things, the emotions come up, right? If there is anxiety, if there is grief, as a parent, you have to be able to be the sponge for the kid. You have to have solved your own emotional trouble so that the kid, when they feel that there's emotional stress on them, they can come to you and you won't react at them. You won't make them feel like they should not have done this to begin with. Right? How many kids come to their parents, they tell them something and they get immediately scolded for it. They get the lecture, like you should not have done this. How many parents themselves have the energy to sit and be patient and listen to all the bullshit the dangerous stuff that the kid did, and you're like, God, why? But you have to help them work through it, right? Those are typically the steps we take.
These factors that you've talked about, these are not factors to treat ADD or treat obesity. These are factors for living a healthy lifestyle, for not being stuck in a rut that is going to lead to burnout or chronic illness or fill in the blank. These are important factors. You talked about awareness. Why do you do the things that you do? And that is such a powerful thing and such an amazing thing to put first and to try to figure out the why behind things. Because understanding that can really be a key to making different decisions, making different choices, setting yourself up for success. You talked about um, making a shift with diet because it's so powerful, changing your microbiome, but not doing it rapidly because then you're setting yourself up for failure. And I think that plays into why so many people start some radical diet change, but they really can't stick with it, or they end up binge eating whenever that time period is up that they tell themselves, I'm going to not eat sugar for 30 days or 7 days, whatever it is. And then they go right back into binge eating. Their microbiome shift isn't up to that, and your body has withdrawals. You talked about sleep, and recovery is such an important aspect, and sleep is such an important aspect for regulating brain chemistry, first of all, but your body needs it in order to help you make good decisions for the next day. So you're setting yourself up for the next day. And I love that you talked about movement, integrating play, and getting dopamine from other areas. And so this is such an amazing thing. Kamy, if people wanted to learn more about you, if they wanted to learn a lot more about Step Together, where could they go to find out more about that?
Anything that I talked about here resonated with you, I strongly encourage you go on our website at steptogether.us. And I'm not going to tell you to book an appointment or anything like that. Just go and read the stories of the team members that we have and see how your story, if you're going through this right now, is not unique. There are so many people who are having the same struggle as you are. And the beautiful thing is now we have a team that's gone through the pain, we've swallowed it, and our purpose is to help others not go through the same thing we did. And if you feel compelled to reach out for help, we're there for you.
Kamy, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. Thank you for the work that you're doing. And hopefully we can catch up with you sometime in the future and see what are the things that you've got going on and maybe learn some more things from you.
Joshua, again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for tuning in to the Discover Health podcast. Remember, your health is a journey, not a destination. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next week.